Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya. Awesome, Naya. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So, I absolutely do not know how I stumbled on this video, but trust me, she already did a great job with the analysis and the example she also gave, right? And trust me, I am sure some people will absolutely in the comment section, arguing because that is absolutely what they know how to do best. And she was talking about why white women hate being called white, right? And these people that will hate being called, they do not like it when you call them white and then pull the card when it is like very, very necessary and also use the privilege like it is their birthright, which is also, yeah, it is part of their birthright because that privilege is something they are very quick to deny and then pull it out whenever it is necessary, and then turn around to tell you that they do not have any privilege. So she was talking about how when it comes to people talking to them about culture appropriation and the rest of it, you see them pull out this, why is everything race, all about race? One thing I have noticed about these people is that they do not like accountability and taking responsibility of some certain things, especially when they do some things. They do not like that. So the best they do is to use reverse psychology, because that is what I call it. They use that to quench, see if they can quench what they have started, like when they culture appropriate and you start talking about, they ask you why is everything all about race. Let's get into this.
You went from this to now this. And when it becomes beneficial to her career, and it will, she will rebrand herself as white.
Okay, I'm going to use the NBA to explain why white women hate being called white. White women are very upset with me right now because that video I posted in 2021 is resurfacing. I think for obvious reasons, because I was right. Ariana Grande did in fact rebrand herself as white when it was beneficial to her career. I'm not the only one who predicted this. Anyway, white women are pissed. So let's talk about why I think that is. First, let's look at some of the comments I've received in the last 24 hours and we're going to break this shit down. Strap in, babes. How did I get here? You sound racist AF. You are the problem. White women live in your heads rent free, mind your business. You are the problem, stay in your lane. My personal favorite, this one we're really gonna break down in a second. Everything you said sounds like women being critical of each other. This isn't about color because this issue doesn't exist with men. The power of language is deeply rooted in the colonial structures of dominance and subordination. And these colonial ideologies have historically categorized and ranked people based on their identities, making whiteness and maleness synonymous with universal or neutral, meaning everything else outside of those identities require specification. For example, in sports, this colonial logic positions men's basketball as the baseline and women's basketball as the deviation from the norm. So we start off with the NBA, the National Basketball Association, not the MNBA, just NBA. And by linguistically marking the WNBA as women's basketball, society subtly reinforces the idea that the WNBA is some kind of secondary, often even lesser category, a category that requires specification because it doesn't totally align with the default. Picking up what I'm putting down. So inherently that classification reflects patriarchal systems of power, which have historically excluded and minimized women's participation in life in general, and of course in sports. Keep following. So the unmarked status of NBA perpetuates the perception that the NBA is real basketball, positioning anything else as some sort of deviation from that. Case in point, this is a comment I got literally 2 hours ago, unprovoked. No one cares about women's basketball. There's so many ridiculous reasons why people feel that way, but the colonial and patriarchal impact on language is one of those reasons. Bringing this back to white women, whiteness, much like masculinity, has long been treated as the default racial identity, which is why white women, white people in general, but white women don't like being called white. It disrupts their unmarked status and forces the acknowledgement of their position within racial hierarchies. They don't like that. It's also why naming whiteness, naming maleness can be seen as a little bit of an act of resistance against colonialism and patriarchal structures and grants equal linguistic status to marginalized identities. Now let's take it a step further and address this comment. Refresh, everything you said sounds like women being critical of each other. This isn't about color because this is not an issue that men have to deal with. The dynamic of white women centering their gender over their race, specifically in conversations about power and inequality, is deeply rooted in the intersections of white supremacy and patriarchy. White women often align themselves with their gender discrimination while distancing themselves from the privileges they hold as white people. And this is why they hate conversations about cultural appropriation, or frequently respond to those conversations by saying, why do you make everything about race? Like, not not everything is about race. It's just hair. They do that to dismiss the issue and reframe it as purely one of gender solidarity, which is typical. They've done that historically. For example, the first couple of waves of feminism. Yeah. So because their whiteness operates as an unmarked category similar to masculinity for men, it allows them to navigate the world without ever having to think about or talk about their race, without ever being really reminded of their race. So when race is named, it disrupts the narrative of universal womanhood that so many white women hold dear to their hearts. Anyway, that's why white women hate being called white. So as an act of resistance today, name a white woman's whiteness, call a white woman white, and just to see what happens. Be prepared for them to call you racist and get really upset. Like, be prepared, I'm telling you. Like, have some fun with it. White women really do hate being called white, part 2, because it seems a lot of them didn't understand the NBA, WNBA example I gave. And seeing as I'm literally a professional basketball player, I feel I'm uniquely qualified to cover this topic. Ongoing debate in my comments, NBA and WNBA isn't the best example here because the two leagues started decades apart. It's not like the WNBA was trying to form at the same time as the NBA and we're told no, they just didn't exist. Another one by a different person, most of what you said was factual. NBA thing is kind of a bad example though. The fact is the NBA is a company and it existed way before the WNBA. Everyone together, we're gonna put our critical thinking caps on. Why? Simple question. Why is it that the NBA was founded 50 years before the WNBA? So the NBA was founded in 1946. Let's take a look at what was happening during that time in terms of women's rights. This is in the US, obviously. Women weren't allowed to open a bank account without a male cosign. They weren't allowed to take out a loan, apply for a line of credit, couldn't own property, couldn't sign legal contracts without a male cosign. You get the idea. So the disparities in the founding of the NBA and the WNBA are the direct result of patriarchy and colonialism shaping societal views on women's roles and capabilities. Men's sports were prioritized and celebrated because patriarchal systems valued men's physicality, competition, and dominance as direct reflections of strength and success. Meanwhile, colonialism reinforced gender hierarchies, relegating women to domestic spheres and excluding them from activities that were deemed inappropriate for their delicate, soft nature. Otherwise, if we lived in like a parallel universe, they would have founded the NBA as like an umbrella term and had the MNBA and WNBA exist at the same time. Obviously, that wasn't a thing. All of this was particularly relevant in 1946 because what was happening also during that time? World War II had just ended. Hold on to that thought for a second. Before we talk World War II, we have to talk about sport history and culture as a whole. And if we want to do that, we have to talk about the Olympic Games. Remember how I just said men's sports represented dominance, strength, and success? I actually talked about this in a podcast, so I'm just going to play the clip. If we're talking about the Olympic Games just as the greatest, most prestigious international sporting event in the world, it was founded by this French aristocrat named Pierre de Coubertin. He was a self-proclaimed fanatical colonialist. He believed the white race to be superior and also believed that women shouldn't participate in public sporting events. And that is exactly kind of what he created in the foundation of the Olympic Games. He also founded the International Olympic Committee. And yeah, his whole vibe was that men and men only were to participate in sports. And the reward that men would get for participating in sports would be the gentle applause of women. Like that's legit, like a direct quote.
Gentle though, because
yeah,
women.
Gentle, exactly. That's, I think, why sports are considered like as this inherently masculine activity. Also, usually the people participating in those sports were white, cis, hetero men, and anyone outside of that wasn't really allowed. By 1924, there was only like 100-ish women competing at the Olympic Games, primarily in like swimming, diving, and tennis. And then it wasn't until 1968 that women were allowed to run in track events longer than 200 meters because women are just too dainty and their little hearts just can't take longer than 200 meters. And that's like recent. Like 1968 is not like a long time ago. It's not possible to have this conversation without applying some kind of intersectional framework. Like it's always also going to be about misogyny, and then you have to mix in race and racism and classism and capitalism. Now that we understand why women's sports wasn't widely accepted or supported, and finally talk about World War II. The founding of the NBA occurred against the backdrop of a significant rollback in women's participation in public life and then of course in sports. Because of course when all the men were gone doing war things, women had to fill men's roles. So during that time, women's participation in sports was starting to gain a little bit more traction, a little bit more popularity, like a little bit. But of course, as soon as all the men came back, the societal priorities shifted back into those traditional gender roles. Essentially, the founding of the NBA was one of the things that epitomized that cultural shift back. So to finish this off, and I'll leave you with a riddle at the end. Let's see how many of y'all get it and why I'm even getting these comments from white women in the first place. Why is it that white women or people in positions of privilege and power have these historical blind spots? Why are they always claiming that everyone has the same opportunities and ignore the structural barriers that have been placed specifically on marginalized people? It's like when white people say to black people, just work hard harder, like just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's why men say that women just don't want to work the hard jobs. Like they could be CEOs if they want to, but like they just don't want to. Why so many men, even to this day, still don't believe the wage gap is real. Exactly why men still say shit like this. No one cares about women's basketball. They truly believe that no one watches women's sports because it's just less popular, because they're less capable and it's boring. Completely ignore the decades upon decades and decades and decades and decades of underfunding, lack of media coverage, and systemic exclusion from everything. These convenient historical omissions by the privileged in conversations about power, privilege, inequality, etc. happen because acknowledging systemic oppression forces them to acknowledge their complicity. This is also why white women in this context claim authority in spaces they have zero knowledge in, particularly over Black professionals. I guarantee if I was a white woman, I don't think I'd have as many white women disagreeing with me on the example that I gave. I think they'd be like, oh my God, I totally get it, makes sense. The caucasity that I will just never understand. It's the same as the mandacity that these men be having. Anyway, here's the riddle I'll leave y'all with to really pull all of this together. Some of y'all have heard it, some of y'all haven't. Let's see if you get it. A father and a son are in a car accident. The father dies at the scene. The son is rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. In the operating room, the surgeon looks at the boy and says, I can't operate on him, he's my son. I'll give you a second. How does that work? The surgeon is his mother. Yeah, I know. I implore all of you to start asking why questions. Start asking why, literally question everything and just ask yourself, why is this the way that it is? And I guarantee 9.5 times out of 10, it's gonna lead back to some colonial patriarchal bullshit.
This is all I got from this video, and I absolutely love her take. She made a great point from what she said. I mean, our reality is that they absolutely do not like to be called that, but then use it when the privilege comes, because they tell you, I am, and you are treating me like a minority, like one of their favorite phrases these days, all right? So, yeah. The truth is that I love the examples, the way she used the sports and all that to give example and all that. And the reality is that if you understand what she is saying, you absolutely will know where she is coming from, right? And I really do hope that a lot of people also understand. I'm sure, I don't think Black women will have any problem or would find it hard. Like, not really hard. We definitely know what she is talking about, especially how she used the NBA and all that to talk about it and the rest of it. Like she said, and that is absolutely 100% correct. She's 100% correct. They do not like any conversation that talks about our culture appropriation, because why would you bring that up? Culture appropriation, right? It's a no-no, because they are the leaders when it comes to culture appropriation, right? And then the only thing when that conversation, culture appropriation, comes up, the only thing you are going to hear is, why is everything about race? Not everything is all about race, and the truth is that they always use that to dismiss this discussion at hand. Like, we don't have to talk about this, right? Because it is not important and because everything is not all about race. But deep down, they know everything is all about race, because if it is not about race, why did they always pull it out when it is necessary and then make it like, why do they always want to tell us that they are when it is necessary, but then pretend like they do not have privilege when they know that the privilege is always all over, written on their faces and all that. So I absolutely understand where she is coming from. And I love also how she said that their whiteness, or how did she say that? I think their whiteness operate from as an unmarked category, right? I guess that is, yes, similar to masculinity for men. She knows what she's saying, and some people will still go to the comment section to argue and tell you that you don't know what you're saying. And I am sure that the majority of them will understand that she was really amazing. She did an incredible job with the breaking down, because left for me, I probably would just probably not break it down the way she did it. And it's actually her topic, and she really did a great job with that, and with her analysis, examples, and all of that. And I am sure they know, well, because they know. They know everything is all about. Why do you make everything about race when they are also looking for a way to take away from you culture appropriation? Then it's we can do it. We can share. I mean, there is how do they say that? Some things called some culture should be shared, or some speciality should be shared. And they really want to be into come into everything you do. Like it is all that important to them. But forgetting that it is actually not all about them majority of the time. Let me know what you all think in the comment section, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye for now.